On March 17, 1943, Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock surfaced his U-boat in the mid-Atlantic and stared through his binoculars at something that shouldn't exist. 3 days earlier, his wolf pack had sent 11 American cargo vessels to the bottom of the ocean. Now, impossibly, a convoy of identical ships steamed past his position, their hulls riding low with fresh cargo bound for Britain. Lehmann Willenbrock lowered his binoculars and turned to his executive officer with a question that haunted Germany's submarine command for the rest of the war. How could the Americans replace ships faster than U-boats could sink them? The answer lay not in some secret weapon or brilliant strategy, but in something far more revolutionary. American shipyards had turned shipbuilding into mass production. Before the war, constructing a cargo ship took 8 to 12 months of careful craftsmanship. Each vessel was essentially custom-built, with skilled workers fitting thousands of unique pieces together like an enormous puzzle. Britain's shipyards, battered by bombing and strangled by material shortages, struggled to replace even half the tonnage Germany's submarines destroyed each month. The mathematics of the Battle of the Atlantic favored the U-boats, and everyone knew it. Britain could endure perhaps another year, maybe 18 months, before starvation and industrial collapse forced surrender. Then, a California industrialist named Henry J. Kaiser proposed something the experts called impossible. Kaiser had never built a ship in his life. He'd made his fortune constructing dams and highways, but he understood something the traditional shipbuilders didn't: assembly line thinking. Kaiser visited Detroit and studied how Ford produced a car every 69 seconds. He returned to California and announced he'd build cargo ships the same way. The maritime establishment laughed. President Roosevelt's advisors dismissed him as a dreamer, but Kaiser had already started hiring. He brought in welders from construction sites, farmers from the Dust Bowl, women from department stores. He didn't want experienced shipwrights set in old methods. He wanted people who'd never built a ship before and didn't know it was supposed to be difficult.
The Liberty ship design itself came from a British merchant vessel, but Kaiser's team simplified everything. They used welding instead of rivets, cutting construction time by 40%. They prefabricated entire sections in factories scattered across the country. Bow sections built in one state, stern assemblies in another, engines manufactured in the Midwest. Rail cars hauled these massive components to the shipyards, where they were lifted by crane and welded together like children's building blocks. Each Liberty ship stretched 441 feet long and could carry 10,000 tons of cargo, enough to supply a full infantry division for a month. The British called them ugly. American sailors called them worse. But they floated, they hauled cargo, and they could be built by people who'd never seen the ocean. The first Liberty ship took 244 days to complete. Kaiser looked at that number and told his managers it wasn't good enough. His crews began working 3 shifts around the clock. They streamlined every motion, eliminated every wasted step. The second ship took 150 days. The fifth took 90. By the summer of 1942, the average construction time had dropped to 42 days. Then Kaiser issued a challenge that made headlines. His Richmond, California shipyard would build a Liberty ship in under 2 weeks. Naval architects said the laws of physics made it impossible. On November 12, 1942, workers laid the keel of the SS Robert E. Piri at 12:01 a.m. 7 days, 15 hours, and 30 minutes later, the completed ship slid down the launching ways. Roosevelt sent a telegram. Newsreels played in theaters nationwide. But Kaiser wasn't finished. In the Atlantic, U-boat commanders started noticing the impossible. Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Suren torpedoed 3 Liberty ships in a single patrol and returned to base expecting commendations. Instead, intelligence officers showed him aerial reconnaissance photos of 18 new Liberty ships launching the same week he'd been at sea. He studied the photographs in silence, then asked how Germany could possibly win this kind of war. The question had no good answer. At the rate American shipyards were producing vessels, U-boats would need to sink one cargo ship every 4 hours around the clock just to break even. Germany's entire submarine fleet numbered barely 300 boats, and only a third could be on station at any given time. The Americans were building ships faster than Germany could build torpedoes to sink them. The human stories behind those production numbers reveal how ordinary people created this industrial miracle. Rose Campbell left her job at a San Francisco bakery and became a welder, joining 27,000 other women at Kaiser's Richmond yard. She worked the graveyard shift, 10 hours climbing through tight spaces with an acetylene torch, then went home to feed her 2 children before grabbing 5 hours of sleep. Joseph James, a sharecropper from Alabama who'd never owned a pair of steel-toed boots, learned to operate a massive overhead crane, guiding 20-ton hull sections into place with tolerances measured in inches. These workers weren't motivated by patriotic speeches or government posters. They were pulled by steady paychecks during the Depression's lingering shadow, pushed by the knowledge that brothers and sons needed those ships to survive. Richmond's population exploded from 23,000 to 100,000 in 18 months. The city built instant neighborhoods, cheap housing, communal kitchens, childcare centers operating 24 hours a day. It was chaotic, exhausting, and it worked. By 1943, American yards were launching 3 Liberty ships every day. The vessels had their problems. Brittle steel occasionally cracked in cold North Atlantic waters. The reciprocating steam engines were old-fashioned and slow. Some ships broke apart in heavy seas. But for every Liberty lost to structural failure, 18 more slid into the water. The German Naval Command understood what this meant. Admiral Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, sent increasingly desperate requests to Hitler for more submarines, more torpedoes, more everything. The Führer promised secret weapons that never materialized. Meanwhile, American shipyards operated at a pace that seemed to defy industrial logic. The SS Joseph N. Teal was built in 10 days. Workers at Kaiser's Swan Island yard, competing with Richmond, completed a ship in 9 days, 16 hours.
The Liberty ships carried more than cargo. They hauled the Sherman tanks that rolled through France, the aviation fuel that kept bombers flying, the medical supplies that saved countless lives. They transported the steel, rubber, food, and ammunition that turned Britain from a besieged island into a launching platform for invasion. In total, American yards built 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. That's more tonnage than the entire British merchant fleet at the war's start. The Germans sank 200 Liberty ships, each loss a tragedy for the men who sailed them. But for every ship that went down, 13 more were already under construction. After the war, Lehman Willenbrock, the U-boat commander who'd witnessed that impossible convoy in March 1943, was interviewed about Germany's defeat. He spoke about torpedo failures, about improved Allied radar and escort tactics, about the closing of the mid-Atlantic air gap. But when asked what moment made him realize Germany would lose, he described surfacing after a successful attack and counting the ships on the horizon. He'd sunk 4 that morning. By afternoon, 7 more had taken their place. That's when he understood that Germany wasn't fighting Britain or even America. They were fighting an industrial capacity so vast it could absorb any loss and respond with overwhelming production. The Liberty ships were slow, ugly, and often uncomfortable, but they won the war by drowning the enemy not in firepower, but in sheer, relentless,
unstoppable supply. Sometimes the greatest weapon isn't the one that strikes hardest. It's the one your opponent can't possibly destroy fast enough to matter.